I was standing at my daughter's stove in Los Angeles, stirring the beef stew had been simmering for 2 hours, adding bay leaves and thyme the way my mother taught me, when Brett stormed into the kitchen. Before I could turn around, his hands slammed into my shoulders and I hit the floor hard. "You're doing it wrong. Useless!" he screamed. "You can't even cook, old woman." From the living room, I heard the television volume surge louder. Diane, my baby girl, pretending she heard nothing. 5 minutes later, a deafening blast shook the walls. She came running and froze. The kitchen looked like a war zone. Steam filled every corner, making it hard to see at first, but as it cleared, the devastation became obvious. The pressure cooker lid had shot straight up and embedded itself in the ceiling, leaving a gaping hole in the drywall. Stew was splattered across the walls, dripping down the white cabinets, pooling on the countertops. The acrid smell of burnt metal mixed with the aroma of the beef and vegetables had been so carefully preparing. Brett was on the floor near the island, writhing and screaming. His face and forearms were bright red, already blistering. The skin on his right hand looked like it was peeling away. My pot of stew, the one he'd been seasoning when he attacked me, sat untouched on the back burner, still simmering peacefully. I pulled myself up from where I'd fallen, my hip throbbing, my shoulder aching. I was 62 years old, and that fall had hurt more than I wanted to admit. But seeing Brett on that floor, seeing what his arrogance had caused, I felt something shift inside me. What happened? Diane stood in the doorway, her hands covering her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. He pushed me away from my stew. I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Took over with that pressure cooker," said Head. "Show me how real cooking is done." "Guess he didn't release the pressure valve properly." Brett groaned, tried to speak through his pain. She did something. Sabotage. "I was on the floor where you threw me," I said coldly. "I didn't touch your precious pressure cooker." Diane stood frozen, trembling. I moved past her, grabbed the phone, dialed 911. While I waited for the operator to answer, I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She was wearing long sleeves, even though it was 78 degrees outside. Her hair hung limp around her face. Shed, lost weight, maybe 15 or 20 pounds since I'd last seen her 6 months ago. There were dark circles under her eyes. 911. "What's your emergency?" "There's been an accident. A pressure cooker exploded. Man in his late 30s, second-degree burns to his face and arms. We need an ambulance." I gave them the address in the Hollywood Hills, answered their questions calmly while Brett continued moaning on the floor. As I waited for the paramedics, pieces started clicking together in my mind. I'd come from Phoenix 2 weeks ago because Diane had called, her voice small and strange, saying Shed had a fall and needed help around the house. When I arrived, she had a cast on her left wrist and bruises up her arm. Shed been vague about how it happened. Brett had been hovering, answering questions for her, never leaving us alone for more than a few minutes at a time. During my 2 weeks here, I'd noticed other things. How Diane jumped when Brett entered a room, how she asked his permission before doing anything, even small things like going to the grocery store. How Shed stopped calling her friends. How she never mentioned her job anymore. Shed been a graphic designer at a marketing firm, passionate about her work. When I asked about it, Brett had answered, "She quit. Too stressful. She's better off at home." The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. 2 young men in Navy uniforms rushed in with their equipment, immediately attending to Brett. They asked questions, assessed his injuries, prepared him for transport. A police officer came too, standard procedure for these kinds of calls. He was in his 40s, with kind eyes and a notepad. "Mom, can you tell me what happened?" I explained clearly, leaving nothing out. How it'd been cooking, how Brett had pushed me down, how Head taken over with the pressure cooker, how it had exploded. The officer wrote everything down, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp. "And you are?" "Laverne Patterson. I'm visiting from Arizona. This is my daughter's home." I gestured to Diane, who stood against the wall, looking like she might collapse. The officer turned to her. "Mom, is this your husband?" Diane nodded, barely moving. "Did you see what happened?" "I was in the living room." Her voice was so soft I could barely hear it. The officer looked at the scene, at the embedded pressure cooker lid, at my pot of undamaged stew, at Brett being loaded onto a gurney. He took photos with a small camera. He made more notes. Then he handed me his card. "If you remember anything else, give me a call." After they left, taking Brett to the hospital, the kitchen felt eerily quiet. Diane and I stood there, surrounded by the mess, neither of us speaking. Finally, she moved to get cleaning supplies from under the sink. "Leave it," I said. "I need to clean it up before Brett gets home." "Diane." I put my hand on her arm, felt her flinch. "Baby girl, we need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about, Mom." She pulled away, grabbed a sponge, started wiping the counters with shaking hands. "It was an accident. Brett was just trying to help. He gets frustrated sometimes because I'm not good at things. You know how I've always been clumsy." Every word felt like a knife. This wasn't my daughter speaking. This was someone else. Someone broken and afraid. The Diane I raised had been strong, confident, full of light. Shed graduated top of her class at UCLA. Shed traveled through Europe alone after college. Shed bought her first car with her own money and been proud of her independence. "You're not clumsy," I said quietly. "You never have been. And what happened today wasn't an accident. Brett pushed me down and then made a mistake with equipment he didn't know how to use. He knows how to use a pressure cooker, Mom. Has a great cook. Much better than either of us." She was scrubbing harder now, her movements frantic. "You probably did something to it when you were seasoning your stew. Maybe you bumped it or turned the heat up too high." "Diane, I never went near that pressure cooker. Well, something happened." She whirled around, and I saw tears streaming down her face. "Something made it explode, and now Brett is hurt, and it's going to be my fault somehow because I invited you here, and you always have to interfere and make things worse." The words hung in the air between us. I felt like I'd been slapped, but underneath the hurt, I recognized what I was seeing. I'd worked as a court stenographer for 30 years before I retired. I'd sat through countless domestic violence cases, heard testimony from hundreds of victims. I knew the patterns. The isolation, the blame, the defense of the abuser, the way reality got twisted until the victim couldn't tell up from down anymore. "I'm going to the hospital," Diane said, grabbing her purse. "To be with my husband. You can stay here and clean up if you want, or you can go back to your hotel. I'm staying here. In the guest room, like I have been. Your flight home is tomorrow. Maybe you should take it." She left without looking at me. I heard her car start, heard her drive away, then I stood alone in that destroyed kitchen, my daughter's words echoing in my head, and I knew with absolute certainty that I wasn't leaving tomorrow. I wasn't leaving at all, until I figured out what Brett had done to my baby girl, and how to get her back. I didn't sleep that night. Around 2 a.m, I heard Diane come home. She went straight to the bedroom without stopping to check on me. I lay in the guest room bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The next morning, I pretended to pack, made a show of putting my clothes in my suitcase, calling the airline to confirm my flight. Diane seemed relieved, more relaxed than she'd been since the explosion. She even made me coffee, though hers looked strange, cloudy. "Thanks for coming, Mom," she said, though her eyes didn't quite meet mine. "I know it wasn't an easy visit. How's Brett?" "He'll be okay. 2nd-degree burns, but they'll heal. He has to keep them bandaged for a few weeks." She paused. "He wants to press charges against you." "Against me." I set my coffee cup down carefully. "For what?" "He says you sabotaged the pressure cooker. That you were angry he criticized your cooking." "Diane, you know that's not true." "I don't know what's true anymore, Mom." She rubbed her forehead. "Brett says, you've always been controlling. That you're trying to break up our marriage because you can't stand to see me happy. He says, that's why Dad left." The words hit like physical blows. "Your father died of pancreatic cancer 15 years ago. He didn't leave. We were married for 32 years, and he loved you more than anything in this world." "I know that. I just meant..." She trailed off, looking confused. "I don't know what I meant." I'm tired. I haven't been sleeping well. I studied her face. Her pupils looked slightly dilated. Her movements were slower than normal, almost dreamlike. A sick feeling started growing in my stomach. What medication are you taking? Just something for anxiety. Brett's doctor prescribed it. I've been so stressed lately. Can I see the bottle? Why? I'm your mother. I'm curious. She hesitated, then went to the kitchen cabinet, pulled out an orange prescription bottle. The label was made out to Brett, not Diane. Alprazolam. 2 milligrams. The instructions said to take 1 tablet as needed for anxiety, not to exceed 2 per day. This is Brett's prescription. He shares it with me. His doctor knows. It's fine. It wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. But I didn't say that. I just nodded, made a mental note of the medication name, and continued my charade of packing. My Uber arrived at 10. Diane hugged me at the door, and for just a second, she felt like my daughter again. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby girl. So much. I got in the Uber with my suitcase, but instead of going to the airport, I had the driver take me to a hotel 3 miles away. I checked in, went to my room, and immediately called my best friend Dorothy back in Phoenix. "How's Diane?" Dorothy asked as soon as she answered. "Dorothy, when's the last time you talked to her?" There was a long pause. "I don't know. Maybe 8 months? I tried calling her last spring, but she never called back. I figured she was busy." 8 months. Diane used to call Dorothy every single week without fail. They'd been close since Diane was in high school, when Dorothy had been her track coach. Dorothy was like an aunt to her. "Did you try to visit?" "Last November. I was going to be in Los Angeles for a conference and called to see if I could stay with her and Brett. He answered her phone, said she was too busy with work projects. Head let her know I called." Dorothy's voice got quieter. "She never called me back, Laverne. I thought maybe I'd done something to upset her." "You didn't do anything. Brett did. I told her everything. The pushing, the explosion, the medication, the way Diane defended him, blamed herself, said things that weren't true." Dorothy listened without interrupting. And when I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. But I'm not leaving her here." After we hung up, I sat on the hotel bed and let myself cry. Not for long, just enough to release the fear and anger and heartbreak that had been building for 2 weeks. Then I washed my face, looked at myself in the mirror, and made a decision. My husband Tom had been a gentleman, kind and patient. When he got sick, Head made me promise to take care of Diane, to always fight for her. I'd kept that promise when she was a child, kept it through her teenage years, kept it when she went to college. I wasn't going to stop now. That afternoon, I drove back to Diane's house in my rental car. I parked 2 blocks away, where my car wouldn't be visible from the house. Then I walked back, using the landscaping and the neighboring properties for cover. Their house was in the hills, surrounded by other expensive homes, all with large yards and plenty of privacy. That privacy worked in my favor now. I made my way to the backyard. They had a pool, a garden, a covered patio. The back of the house was mostly glass, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out on the view. I crouched behind a large planter, pulled out my phone, and waited. Around 3 o'clock, Brett came home from the hospital. His face and arms were bandaged, white gauze covering the burns. He walked into the house, and I heard him call for Diane. She appeared from somewhere, and he said something I couldn't hear. She nodded, went to the kitchen, made coffee. I watched her pour 2 cups, watched Brett add something from a small prescription bottle to one of them. Not his cup. Hers. He handed her the doctored coffee. She drank it without question, without even looking at it closely. Within 20 minutes, her whole demeanor changed. She became quieter, slower, more compliant. Brett's face relaxed. He touched her hair, almost possessively, and said something that made her smile vaguely. Then his phone rang. He answered it, walked into another room. Diane sat on the couch, staring at nothing, her coffee cup loose in her hand. She looked like a ghost of herself. I stayed there for 3 more hours, watching through the windows, documenting everything on my phone. At 6, a car pulled up. A woman got out, mid-20s, blonde, wearing designer clothes and expensive shoes. Even if she tries to interfere, Diane won't listen to her. I've made sure of that. He smiled, and it was the coldest expression I'd ever seen. The medication doses increase tomorrow. By Friday, Diane won't even remember her own name. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my phone, but I kept recording. They talked for another 10 minutes, discussing their plans. How they'd sell the house, move to Santa Barbara, start over. How Brett had been moving money out of Diane's accounts for months. How Head already sold most of her grandmother's jewelry, piece by piece, through a dealer in Beverly Hills. That jewelry had been worth over $200,000, my mother's collection, given to Diane when she turned 25, a legacy of 3 generations. I'd watched Diane cry with joy when I gave her that velvet box. Watched her try on each piece with such care and love. Brett and Crystal eventually went upstairs. I stayed long enough to make sure they weren't coming back down. Then I slipped away, back to my car, my heart hammering so hard I thought I might have a heart attack right there. At the hotel, I sat on the bed and watched the video I'd recorded. It was all there. The drugging, the affair, the plan to commit Diane to a psychiatric facility, the theft of her inheritance, everything. I pulled out the business card the police officer had given me yesterday, thought about calling him. But I realized I needed more than just video evidence. I needed medical proof of the drugging, financial proof of the theft, legal counsel, a strategy. I thought about Tom, about what He'd do in this situation. He'd always been careful, methodical. He'd plan. He'd gather every piece of evidence possible before making a move. Then I remembered Patrick. Patrick Walsh, a detective I'd worked with for years when I was a court stenographer. He'd retired 5 years ago, moved to a small town outside Phoenix, but we'd stayed in touch. We'd send Christmas cards, have coffee a few times a year. He'd been a good detective, thorough and smart. I called him. It was late, almost 10 o'clock, but he answered on the 3rd ring. Laverne? Everything okay? Patrick, I need help. My daughter's in trouble. And I don't know who else to call. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he said, "Send me that video. Then give me 12 hours. I still have friends in Los Angeles. We're going to get your daughter back." For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt something like hope. Patrick called me back at 8 the next morning. "I've got a contact for you. Grace Hamilton, domestic violence attorney in Beverly Hills. She's one of the best. I've sent her the video. She'll see you today." Grace's office was in a sleek building on Wilshire Boulevard. She was in her early 50s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. We sat in her conference room, and she played my video on a large screen. "This is damning," she said when it finished. "But we need more. We need medical evidence of the drugging. We need financial records showing the theft. We need proof that he's planning to have her falsely committed. And we need to move fast. If he's planning to do this Friday, we have less than 2 days. What do? We get everything we can. Today." She pulled out a legal pad, started making notes. "That medication he's giving her, you said the bottle was in his name." "Yes. Alprazolam. We need that bottle. We also need a sample of Diane's blood to prove she's being drugged. We need his laptop, his phone, his financial records. And we need to do all of this without him knowing we're coming." "How?" Grace looked at me directly. "How well do you know your daughter's house?" "Very well. I stayed there for 2 weeks. Does Diane have a computer?" She did. Brett took it away 6 months ago, said she was spending too much time on social media. Of course he did. What about Brett's office? He has a home office, 2nd floor, faces the backyard. Security system. Yes, but I know the code. Diane gave it to me when I first arrived. Grace leaned back in her chair. "I can't officially advise you to break into your daughter's house. That would be illegal. And I'm an officer of the court. But if you happen to be in that house, and you happen to find evidence of a crime, and you happen to bring that evidence to the police, that would be a different situation entirely. She pushed a piece of paper across the table. This is the name of a private laboratory. They can test pills, test blood, document everything with proper chain of custody. This is the card of a detective in the LAPD Domestic Violence Unit. She's expecting your call. I took both cards, tucked them in my purse. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is dangerous, Laverne. If Brett catches you, he could hurt you. Has already shown he's violent. Has destroying my daughter. I'm not letting that continue. Grace smiled then, a fierce, approving smile. Good. Call me the moment you have anything. My phone is on 24 hours a day. I left her office feeling energized, purposeful. Patrick had texted me while I was in the meeting. Flying in tonight. Don't do anything stupid until I get there. But I couldn't wait. Every hour that passed was another hour. Diane was being drugged, manipulated, destroyed. I drove to their house, parked in my usual spot 2 blocks away, and watched. Brett's car was in the driveway. Crystal's car pulled up around 11. They went inside together. At noon, they both left. I watched them drive away, waited 5 more minutes to make sure they weren't coming back. Then I moved. I used my key, the one Diane had given me. The security system beeped, and I entered the code. Silence. I was inside. The house felt different now, knowing what I knew. It felt contaminated, dangerous. I moved quickly up the stairs to Brett's office. The door was open. His desk was cluttered with papers, and his laptop sat open, still powered on. Had been so confident, so arrogant, he hadn't even logged out. I pulled out a USB drive I'd bought that morning, plugged it into his computer, and started copying files. There were folders labeled insurance, medical, Diane treatment, finances. I copied everything. While the files transferred, I searched his desk. In the bottom drawer, I found a folder marked Emma. Inside were old newspaper clippings about a woman who'd died 10 years ago. Emma Hartford. She'd fallen down the stairs in her home, broken her neck. The death had been ruled accidental. She'd been married to Brett at the time. There were other papers in the folder. Insurance documents showing Brett had received $500,000 after Emma's death. A wedding photo showing a young blonde woman with a bright smile. An obituary mentioning that Emma had recently inherited money from her parents. My skin crawled. Brett had done this before. The computer finished copying. I pulled out the USB drive, tucked it in my pocket. I photographed the Emma folder with my phone. Then I searched the rest of the office. In a locked filing cabinet, I found folders labeled with dates. Each one contained bank statements showing transfers from Diane's accounts to accounts I didn't recognize. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, moved over the course of 8 months. I photographed every page. In another drawer, I found a file labeled Commitment Procedure. Inside were printed articles about how to have someone involuntarily committed in California, along with handwritten notes about psychiatrists who might be flexible for the right price. There was a business card for a Dr. Raymond Marsh, with a note, agreed to $5,000 for signature. I heard a car in the driveway. My heart stopped. I shoved everything back in the drawers, closed the filing cabinet, made sure the desk looked untouched. The front door opened. Voices. Brett and Crystal were back. I looked around frantically. The office had a closet. I slipped inside, pulled the door almost closed, leaving just a crack so I could see and hear. Brett and Crystal came upstairs. They entered the office. Brett sat at his desk. Crystal leaned against the bookshelf. "We need to speed this up," Brett said. "I have a bad feeling about the old woman. She's too calm, too quiet. You said she went back to Arizona. I know what I said. But something feels off." He opened his desk drawer, pulled out the Emma folder. I stopped breathing. He flipped through it, then put it back. "We do it tomorrow. Not Friday. Tomorrow. Can you move that fast? I'll pay the psychiatrist double. He'll sign whatever I need. We take Diane to the facility tomorrow afternoon. Get her admitted. Once she's inside, it's over. The paperwork is already drawn up. I have power of attorney the moment she's committed. What about the mother? If she comes back, well, deal with it. But by the time she figures out what happened, it'll be too late." He pulled Crystal close, kissed her. This time tomorrow, everything changes. They left the office, went downstairs. I heard them in the kitchen, heard Diane's voice, soft and confused. Heard Brett talking to her, his voice gentle, loving, completely fake. I waited until I heard them go into the living room, then I slipped out of the closet, down the stairs, and out the back door. My legs were shaking so badly I could barely walk, but I made it to my car. At the hotel, I called Grace. "We need to move now. Hez doing it tomorrow. Send me everything you found. I'll file emergency motions with the court tonight. Well, have protective orders by morning." I sent her the photos, the USB drive contents, everything. Then I called Patrick. "Where are you?" "LAX. Just landed. Come to my hotel. We're going in tomorrow." That night, I barely slept again. But this time, it wasn't from fear or helplessness, it was from determination. I'd found the evidence. I had a lawyer. I had backup, and tomorrow, I was getting my daughter back. Patrick arrived at my hotel at 7 in the morning. He looked older than I remembered, his hair more gray, but his eyes were still sharp, still alert. He hugged me at the door. "You holding up okay? I will be once Diane's safe." We sat at the small table in my room, and I walked him through everything again. Showed him all the evidence on my phone, on the USB drive. Showed him the photos of Emma Hartford's file. "This is bigger than I thought," Patrick said. "Brett's done this before. Emma Hartford's death should have been investigated more thoroughly. I made some calls last night. The detective who worked that case is retired now. But he remembers it. Said he always thought it was suspicious but couldn't prove anything. Can we get that case reopened? Maybe. But right now, we focus on Diane. Once we get her safe, we can worry about getting justice for Emma too." He pulled out his phone, showed me a series of text messages. "I've been in touch with Detective Sarah Chen at LAPD. She works domestic violence cases. She's got a warrant ready to execute this morning." A warrant? For Brett's arrest. For assault. For starters. What he did to you, pushing you down, that's battery. We've got the police report from the day of the explosion. We've got your testimony. We've got the video showing him drugging Diane. That's enough for an arrest warrant and a search warrant. What about Diane? She won't understand. She'll think we're attacking Brett." Patrick's expression softened. "I know. But we can't wait for her to understand. We have to act first, explain later. Sometimes that's what love looks like." At 9, Grace called. Judge signed the protective orders. Brett is barred from contacting Diane. We also got an emergency conservatorship hearing set for next week. If the medical evidence shows she's been drugged, we can get her into proper care. What do we do now? Meet me at the house at 10. Police will be there too. Bring your friend Patrick. We're ending this today. The next hour felt like the longest of my life. Patrick and I drove to Diane's house separately. Me in my rental car, him in his. Grace was already there, parked on the street, along with 2 police cruisers. Detective Chen was a woman in her late 30s. Professional and calm. She introduced herself, shook my hand. "Miss Patterson, I've reviewed all the evidence you gathered. I want you to know that what you did was incredibly brave, and it's going to save your daughter's life." At exactly 10 o'clock, we approached the house. Detective Chen knocked on the door. Brett answered, his bandaged face showing surprise and then anger when he saw the police. "What's going on?" "Brett Hammond, you're under arrest for assault and battery." Detective Chen read him his rights, while another officer handcuffed him. Brett started shouting, claiming innocence, saying it was all a misunderstanding. "Where's Diane?" I pushed past them into the house. She was on the couch, her eyes unfocused, confused. When she saw me, she tried to stand but seemed too disoriented. "Mom? What's happening?" "We're getting you help, baby." I sat beside her, took her hand. It was cold, clammy. "You can't do this." Brett was yelling from the doorway. "Diane, tell them your mother is crazy." But Diane just looked at him, then at me, then down at her hands. She seemed unable to process what was happening. While Detective Chen dealt with Brett, the other officers executed the search warrant. They found the pill bottles in the kitchen, the ones Brett had been using to drug Diane. They found his laptop, his phone, his files. They found everything Id already documented and more. Grace knelt in front of Diane. "Diane, my name is Grace Hamilton. I'm an attorney. Your mother asked me to help you. We believe your husband has been hurting you, and we need to get you to a hospital to make sure you're safe. Is that okay?" Diane's eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand." "I know you don't, sweetheart, but you will. We're going to help you understand." An ambulance arrived, summoned by Detective Chen. Paramedics came in, checked Deanna's vital signs, noted her confused state. They agreed to transport her to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center for evaluation. As they loaded Diane into the ambulance, Brett was being put into a police car. He looked at me with pure hatred. "You'll pay for this, old woman. You've destroyed everything." "No," I said calmly. "You destroyed it yourself." Patrick put his hand on my shoulder. "Come on. Let's follow the ambulance." At the hospital, doctors examined Diane thoroughly. They drew blood, ran tests, documented everything. Grace had arranged for a specialist in toxicology to review the results immediately. By late afternoon, we had confirmation. Diane had massive amounts of alprazolam in her system, far beyond any therapeutic dose. She'd been systematically overdosed for months, kept in a state of constant sedation and confusion. "How long until it's out of her system?" I asked the doctor. "Several days for the worst of it, weeks for complete clearance. She's going to go through withdrawal. It won't be pleasant." The doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Patel, looked at me with sympathy. "But she'll recover, physically, at least. The psychological damage will take longer." They admitted Diane to a private room. I stayed with her, held her hand while she drifted in and out of consciousness. Patrick and Grace handled everything else, all the legal details, all the paperwork. That evening, while Diane slept, Grace came in with an update. "Brett's been charged. Assault, drugging someone without consent, financial fraud. We found evidence of over $600,000 stolen from Diana's accounts. Hess being held without bail." "What about Crystal?" "She's been questioned. Claims she didn't know about the drugging. That Brett told her Diane was mentally ill and needed care. She's cooperating in exchange for reduced charges." "And the psychiatrist?" "Dr. Marsh. Arrested this afternoon. He admitted Brett paid him to sign commitment papers. Hez lost his medical license." I looked at my daughter, pale and small in the hospital bed. "How long until we can take her home?" "A few days, maybe. She needs medical supervision during the withdrawal." Grace sat in the chair next to mine. "Laverne, you did something remarkable. You saved your daughter's life." "I just did what any mother would do." "No. Most mothers wouldn't have known what to look for. Most wouldn't have been brave enough to gather evidence. Most wouldn't have kept fighting when their daughter pushed them away." She paused. "You're a hero." I didn't feel like a hero. I felt exhausted and heartbroken and angry. But I also felt something else. Hope. For the first time in weeks, I felt real hope. Diane spent 3 days in the hospital. I stayed with her every moment, watching as the drugs slowly left her system. It wasn't easy. She had tremors, nausea, confusion. Sometimes she cried without knowing why. Sometimes she was angry. But slowly, gradually, she started becoming more alert. On the 4th day, she was sitting up in bed, eating solid food. The fog in her eyes was starting to clear. That's when Amanda arrived. Amanda Clark had been Diane's best friend since college. They'd been roommates at UCLA, started their careers together, been in each other's weddings. But I hadn't seen Amanda in over a year, not since Diane started pulling away from everyone. When Ed called Amanda 2 days ago and told her what happened, she'd been devastated. She'd known something was wrong, but Brett had told her Diane needed space, was dealing with family issues, didn't want visitors. Amanda had believed him, had given Diane that space. Now Amanda walked into the hospital room, saw Diane in that bed, and burst into tears. "Oh my God. Diane." Diane looked up, and for the first time in days, I saw real emotion cross her face. Recognition, relief. Amanda. They held each other and cried, and I stepped out of the room to give them privacy. Patrick was waiting in the hallway with coffee. Grace called. He said, "Brett's lawyer is trying to get him released. Claims he's being persecuted, that this is all a misunderstanding. Will it work? Not a chance. The evidence is overwhelming. Plus, I found something else." He handed me a folder. Emma Hartford's case. I've been digging into it. Found the original detective's notes. He had suspected Brett all along. Emma had told a friend she was afraid of her husband, that had been acting strange since her parents died and left her money. The friend came forward but wasn't believed at the time. So Brett killed Emma. We can't prove it yet. But we're building a case. Between what he did to Emma and what he did to Diane, we're looking at a pattern. He marries women with money, isolates them, takes everything, then disposes of them. The thought made me sick. If I hadn't come to Los Angeles, if I hadn't trusted my instincts, Diane would have been committed to that facility. Brett would have taken everything. And eventually, I believed now, she would have ended up like Emma. That evening, the hospital wanted to move Diane to a psychiatric evaluation, standard procedure after a drugging case. Grace fought it, argued that Diane had been the victim of drugging and needed time to recover without additional trauma. Eventually, they agreed to keep her in the medical wing for observation instead. On the 5th day, they decided Diane was stable enough for interviews. Detective Chen came, along with a prosecutor from the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office. They needed Diane's testimony if they were going to build the strongest case possible against Brett. I sat with Diane while she talked to them, watched her face as she slowly, painfully, began to remember everything Brett had done. The isolation, the control, the medication, the fear. It was hard to watch, but I stayed. She needed to know I was there. "He changed my passwords," she said at one point, her voice shaking. "To my email, my bank accounts, everything. Said it was for security, but really it was so I couldn't see what he was doing." "When did that start?" Detective Chen asked gently. "About 8 months ago. Right after my grandmother died." Diane looked at me. "That's when things got really bad. He said I was too emotional to handle the inheritance. That he'd take care of it for me." I trusted him. "The jewelry," I said quietly. "Your grandmother's jewelry." Diane's face crumpled. "He said it was in a safe deposit box." Was he lying? "He sold it, sweetheart. Piece by piece." She put her face in her hands and sobbed. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Janet Wu, made notes, her expression grim. "We're going to get justice for you, Diane. I promise you that." On the 6th day, Brett's preliminary hearing was held. I went, even though Grace advised against it. I needed to see him, needed to look him in the eye. He sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his burns still bandaged, looking nothing like the confident, controlling man who'd terrorized my daughter. When he saw me in the courtroom, his face twisted with hatred. But I didn't look away. I stared right back at him, until he was the one who broke eye contact. The judge heard the evidence, saw the videos, reviewed the medical reports, listened to testimony from Detective Chen, from the toxicologist, from the officers who'd found the drugging evidence. At the end, he ruled there was more than enough evidence to proceed to trial. Brett was remanded back to custody without bail. As they led him out of the courtroom, he turned and looked at Diane, who'd been strong enough to attend. "You'll never survive without me," he called out. "You're nothing without me." Diane stood up, and her voice was clear and steady. "I'm everything without you." It was the moment I knew she was going to be okay. But that moment was interrupted by something unexpected. Brett's mother, a woman I'd met only once before, stood up from the back of the courtroom. "My son is a good man. This is all lies. That girl trapped him, took advantage of him." The judge banged his gavel. "Order in the court." Brett's mother kept shouting, "She's making it all up for money. She's a liar." Security escorted her out, but her words hung in the air. Patrick, sitting next to me, shook his head. Some people never see the truth, even when it's right in front of them. She raised him. I said quietly. She created that monster. Of course she can't see it. After the hearing, we went back to the hospital. Diane was being discharged the next day. We needed to figure out where she'd go. What came next? She can't go back to that house, Grace said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Shell, come to Arizona, I said. Stay with me until she's ready to figure out what's next. But Diane surprised us. I want to stay in Los Angeles. This is my city. I have friends here. A career here. I'm not letting Brett take that away from me too. Then well, find you a safe place, Amanda said. My apartment has a guest room. You'll stay with me. And just like that, we had a plan. Diane would live with Amanda. She'd start therapy. Start rebuilding her life. Grace would handle all the legal matters, the divorce, the recovery of assets. It'd go back to Arizona, but visit regularly, as often as Diane needed. On Diane's last night in the hospital, we sat together in her room. Just the two of us, mother and daughter, finally able to talk honestly. I'm so sorry, Mom, she said. The things I said to you, about Dad, about you being controlling, I didn't mean any of it. I know, baby, that wasn't you. That was the drugs and the fear talking. How did you know? How did you know something was wrong when I didn't even know? Because I'm your mother. I've known you since the moment you were born. I know your real voice, your real self. And that person I saw in that house, that wasn't you. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat like that for a long time. Outside the window, Los Angeles sparkled in the darkness, millions of lights, millions of stories. Ours was just one of them, but in that moment, it felt like the most important story in the world. Diane was discharged from the hospital on a Thursday morning. Amanda picked her up, took her to the apartment they'd now share. I followed in my rental car, helped them get settled. Diane was quiet, tired, but there was something different about her, a clarity that hadn't been there before. Over the next few weeks, I flew back and forth between Phoenix and Los Angeles. Each time I saw Diane, she was a little stronger, a little more herself. She started therapy 3 times a week with a specialist in domestic violence trauma. She started eating regularly again, gaining back the weight she'd lost. The dark circles under her eyes faded, but the memories were the hardest part. As the drugs fully cleared her system, everything came back with painful clarity. 2 weeks after she left the hospital, Diane called me at 2 a.m. I was in Phoenix, asleep in my own bed. Her voice was shaking. Mom, I remember the stairs. What stairs, baby? 6 months ago. He pushed me down the stairs. That's how I broke my wrist. It wasn't a fall. He pushed me because I questioned why money was missing from our account. She was crying now, gulping breaths. And he told me if I ever told anyone, he'd make sure you had an accident. He said old people die all the time, and no one would suspect anything. My blood ran cold. He threatened to kill me. He said he'd make it look like a fall, or a car accident, or a heart attack. He said he knew how to do it because... She stopped, and I heard her breathing hard, trying to calm herself, because he'd done it before. Emma. He didn't say her name, but he implied it. He said his first wife had been difficult too, and she wasn't a problem anymore. I sat up in bed, turned on the light. Diane, you need to tell Detective Chen this. And Janet Wu. This is important. I know. I'm seeing them tomorrow. Amanda's coming with me. The next day, Diane gave her full statement, including the threats against me, the implications about Emma, everything she'd remembered. Janet Wu's face was grim as she listened. This changes things, she said when Diane finished, threatening a witness, admission of prior crimes. I'm going to contact the prosecutor who handled Emma Hartford's case. We're going to see about reopening that investigation. And they did. Within a week, Patrick's detective friend in Phoenix had connected with Los Angeles investigators. They exhumed Emma Hartford's body, did a new autopsy, found evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of her head that had been missed the first time. Injuries consistent with being pushed from behind. Brett was charged with Emma's murder. I flew back to Los Angeles for Diana's therapy sessions sometimes. Her therapist, Dr. Williams, was a compassionate woman who specialized in helping victims of coercive control. She explained to me how Brett had systematically broken down Diana's sense of self, her reality, her relationships. It's called gaslighting. Dr. Williams said during one session where Shed invited me to participate. He made Diane question her own perceptions, her own memories. Combined with the drugs, she literally couldn't trust her own mind. "How do I come back from that?" Diane asked, her voice small. "One day at a time. One truth at a time. You start by reconnecting with the people who love you. You start by proving to yourself that reality is real, that your perceptions matter, that you can trust yourself again." It was a slow process. Some days were better than others. There were days when Diane seemed almost back to normal, laughing with Amanda, making plans for the future. And there were days when she couldn't get out of bed, paralyzed by what had happened to her. But slowly, gradually, she healed. 3 months after Brett's arrest, the civil case went to court. Brett had hidden or spent most of Diane's money, but Grace had managed to track down some of it. They'd recovered about $200,000 from various accounts. They'd recovered some of the jewelry from the dealers Brett had sold to. The house was still in both their names, worth about $1.2 million. The judge awarded Diane everything: the house, the recovered money, the jewelry, plus damages for pain and suffering. Brett's lawyer tried to argue, but the evidence was overwhelming. Brett had stolen from Diane, drugged her, abused her. He deserved nothing. Diane sold the house immediately. She couldn't stand to be in it, didn't want any connection to that life. She used part of the money to buy a small condo in Santa Monica, closer to Amanda, with ocean views and sunlight. She used the rest to pay off her student loans, to rebuild her savings, to start fresh. 4 months after the arrest, the criminal trial began. I flew to Los Angeles and stayed for the entire 2 weeks, sat in that courtroom every single day, watching justice unfold. Diane testified. It was the hardest thing I'd ever watched her do. She sat in that witness box and told her story. The drugging, the isolation, the theft, the abuse, the threats. She cried sometimes, but her voice never wavered. Brett's defense attorney tried to discredit her, suggested she was exaggerating, that the drugs had made her imagine things, but there was too much evidence. The videos I'd recorded, the medical reports, the financial records, the testimony from Crystal, from Dr. Marsh, from the other witnesses, and then there was Emma's case, the new autopsy results. The testimony from Emma's friend Hode tried to warn people 10 years ago. The insurance records showing Brett had gained financially from her death. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty. On all counts. Assault, drugging, fraud, attempted murder, and for Emma's case, murder in the 2nd degree. When the verdict was read, Diane grabbed my hand and squeezed so hard it hurt. Tears streamed down her face. Amanda, sitting on her other side, put her arm around Diane's shoulders. Brett showed no emotion, just sat there, staring straight ahead. 2 weeks later, at sentencing, the judge spoke directly to Brett. "You are a predator who targeted vulnerable women, isolated them, stole from them, and destroyed their lives. You killed one woman and came close to destroying another. The court shows you no mercy. 18 years for Diane's case, 25 to life for Emma's murder. Consecutive sentences. Brett would spend the rest of his life in prison." As they led him away, he looked at me one last time. I met his gaze without fear, without anger, just with the calm certainty that justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters wanted to talk to us. Diane declined, but I stopped for just a moment. "What do you want other families to know?" one reporter asked. "Trust your instincts," I said. "If someone you love is changing, if they're pulling away, if something feels wrong, don't give up. Fight for them. Even when they push you away, even when they tell you you're wrong. Sometimes love means being uncomfortable, being persistent, being brave, and it's always worth it." That night, we had dinner at Amanda's apartment. Diane cooked. something she hadn't done since before Brett. She made pasta, simple and delicious. We ate together, the three of us, and for the first time in months, Diane laughed. Really laughed. "I want to do something," Diane said as we cleaned up, "something to help other people going through this." "Like what?" Amanda asked. "I don't know yet. Maybe a support group, maybe advocacy work. Something so that other women don't have to go through what I did." She looked at me. "And so other mothers know that it's okay to fight, even when your kids tell you not to." 6 months after the trial, Diane started a support group for survivors of coercive control and domestic abuse. It met twice a month at a community center in Culver City. I flew in for the first meeting, watched my daughter stand in front of 15 other women and share her story. "My name is Diane," she said, "and I'm a survivor." The women in that room, they understood. They'd been through similar things: isolation, control, gaslighting. Some had escaped, like Diane. Some were still trying to figure out how. Diane told them about Brett, about the drugs, the threats, the systematic destruction of her life. She told them about me, about how Eid refused to give up even when Shed pushed me away. "My mother saved my life," she said, her voice strong and clear. "She trusted her instincts when I couldn't trust my own. She fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself." And if you have someone like that in your life, someone who's trying to help you, please listen to them. Please let them in. After the meeting, women came up to Diane, hugged her, thanked her. One woman, probably in her 50s, had tears in her eyes. "My daughter won't talk to me," she said. "Her husband has convinced her I'm toxic." "I don't know what to do." Diane took her hands. "Don't give up. Keep trying. Keep reaching out. One day, she'll need you, and when that day comes, you need to be ready to fight for her." Watching this, watching my daughter transform her pain into purpose, I felt something close to peace. 1 year after Brett's conviction, Diane and I stood in my kitchen in Phoenix. We were making stew together, the same recipe I'd been preparing that terrible day in Los Angeles. The same one my mother had taught me. The same one Id taught Diane when she was young. She stirred the pot while I added seasonings: bay leaves, thyme, a pinch of pepper. We worked in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from deep understanding and healed wounds. "You know what's funny?" Diane said, tasting the broth. "I used to hate cooking. When I was married to Brett, the kitchen felt like a battlefield. Every meal was a chance for him to criticize, to control, to make me feel small. And now I love it. Amanda and I cook together all the time. I've been taking classes. I made Thanksgiving dinner for 12 people last month." She smiled. "Turns out I'm actually pretty good at it when no one's telling me I'm doing it wrong." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You were always good at it, baby. He just made you doubt yourself." The stew simmered on the stove, filling the house with warmth and rich aromas. So different from that day, yet somehow completing a circle. Wed started with violence and fear in a Los Angeles kitchen. Wed ended with peace and healing in an Arizona kitchen. Diane was thriving now. Shed gone back to work, freelancing as a graphic designer from her new condo. Shed reconnected with old friends, made new ones through her support group. She was dating someone, a kind man named Thomas, who worked as a teacher and treated her with respect and patience. The support group had grown. What started with 15 women now had over 40 regular members. Diane had been invited to speak at colleges, at domestic violence awareness events, at women's shelters. She told her story over and over, and each time, it helped someone else find the courage to escape, to fight back, to reclaim their life. Shed even testified before the California state legislature about coercive control laws, pushing for better protections for victims. The legislation passed. Diane's testimony had helped make that happen. As for Brett, Head appealed his conviction. The appeal was denied. Head tried to contact Diane from prison. Those letters were blocked. His family had tried to reach out too, still insisting he was innocent, that Diane had somehow orchestrated everything. We ignored them. Emma Hartford's family had reached out, though. They'd thanked us for giving them closure, for proving that Emma hadn't just fallen, that she'd been murdered. They'd established a foundation in Emma's name to help domestic violence victims. Diane sat on the board. Patrick had retired fully now, but he kept in touch. He and Dorothy had started dating, which delighted me. Head found love in his 70s, proof that it's never too late for happiness. Grace Hamilton had become a friend. Shed handled Diane's divorce with fierce competence, and now she called every few months just to check in. Shed told me once that Diane's case had reminded her why she became a lawyer, why she kept fighting for victims even when it was hard. As Diane and I finished cooking, as we set the table and called Amanda and Thomas in from the living room where they'd been watching a game, I thought about everything we'd been through. The pain, the fear, the fight, the victory. "Mom," Diane said as we all sat down to eat, "I never properly thanked you. You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You saved my life, not just from Brett, but from myself, from the person I'd become under his control. You saw through all of it, through the drugs and the lies and the manipulation. You saw me, the real me, even when I couldn't see myself. That's what mothers do, sweetheart. Not all mothers. Some mothers give up, some mothers accept the lies, some mothers don't fight." She had tears in her eyes now. "But you fought. Even when I hated you for it. Even when I said terrible things. Even when it would have been easier to walk away. You fought for me." I reached across the table, took her hand. "I would fight 1,000 battles for you, baby girl. Every single time. That's not heroism. That's just love." We ate together, all of us, the stew perfectly seasoned, rich, and nourishing. And as I looked around that table, at my daughter healthy and whole, at her best friend who'd stood by her, at the good man who was learning to love her the right way, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Complete and total peace. Later that evening, after Thomas and Amanda had left, Diane and I sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in shades of orange and pink. "What did you learn from all this?" Diane asked. "If you had to sum it up, what's the most important lesson?" I thought about it for a long moment. I learned that love isn't always gentle. Sometimes it's fierce. Sometimes it fights. Sometimes it does uncomfortable things, makes hard choices, refuses to back down even when everyone says you should. What else? I learned that a mother's instinct is real. When something feels wrong, when someone you love is changing in ways that don't make sense, trust that feeling. Even if you can't prove it yet. Even if everyone tells you you're overreacting, trust what you know in your bones to be true. And I learned that isolation is the abuser's most powerful weapon. Brett took you away from everyone who loved you, everyone who could have helped you see the truth. He made you doubt me, doubt your friends, doubt yourself. Breaking through that isolation, staying connected even when it's hard, that's how we fight back against abusers. Diane nodded slowly. I learned something too. I learned that it's never too late. Even when you think you're too far gone, too broken, too lost, there's always a way back. As long as you have even one person who refuses to give up on you. That's right. And I learned that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up. It's about fighting even when you're scared. It's about taking back your life, one small choice at a time. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sky darken, watching the stars emerge, one by one. "Your father would be so proud of you," I said finally. "Of the woman you've become, of your courage, of how you've turned your pain into purpose. He'd be proud of you too, Mom. You're the bravest person I know. I'm not brave. I'm just a mother who loves her daughter. That's what bravery is." As we sat there in the gathering darkness, I thought about all the other families going through similar struggles. All the other mothers who could sense something was wrong, but didn't know what to do. All the other daughters who were trapped, isolated, controlled. I thought about Emma Hartford, who didn't have someone to fight for her, who died alone. Her death written off as an accident, her suffering unrecognized. And I thought about all the women in Diane's support group, all the survivors who were learning to trust themselves again, to rebuild their lives, to find their strength. This story, our story, it mattered, not just to us, but to all of them, because it proved that escape is possible, that healing is possible, that justice is possible, that love can win, even against the darkest evil. Promise me something, Diane said, breaking the silence. Anything. If I ever have a daughter, if I ever become a mother, promise you'll teach me to fight for her the way you fought for me. Promise you'll show me how to trust my instincts, how to be fierce when I need to be, how to never give up. I promise, baby girl. But you already know how. You've already learned it. You're going to be an amazing mother someday, if that's what you choose. Because I had an amazing mother to learn from. The stars were fully visible now, scattered across the sky like diamonds. Somewhere in that vast universe, other stories were unfolding. Other battles were being fought. Other mothers were fighting for their children. Other daughters were finding their way back to themselves. Our story was just one among millions, but it was ours, and Wed survived it. More than survived. Wed triumphed. Wed taken the worst thing that ever happened to us and transformed it into something meaningful, something that helped others. That was the real victory, not just escaping Brett, not just seeing him convicted, but taking that pain and turning it into purpose, taking that darkness and creating light. As we finally went inside, as Diane hugged me goodnight and headed to the guest room, I stood for a moment in my kitchen. The same kitchen where Id taught her to make stew when she was 10 years old, the same kitchen where Wed just made it together again, both of us whole, both of us healed. I thought about that day in Los Angeles, standing at Diane's stove, adding seasoning to my stew. I thought about Brett pushing me down, about the explosion, about everything that followed. And I thought about this moment, right now, where Wed ended up. Safe. Together. Stronger than ever. Sometimes the journey through darkness is necessary to fully appreciate the light. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what truly matters. Sometimes you have to fight the hardest battle of your life to discover who you really are. Wed fought that battle. Wed walked through that darkness. And Wed emerged on the other side, scarred but not broken, hurt but healing, changed but somehow more ourselves than Wed ever been. That's the lesson I want to leave you with. If someone you love is in trouble, don't give up. If your instincts tell you something is wrong, trust them. If the fight seems impossible, fight anyway. Because love is worth fighting for. Family is worth fighting for. And the human spirit, when pushed to its limits, is capable of extraordinary things. Your children may grow up, they may become adults, start their own lives, make their own choices, but they'll always be your babies. And you never ever stop protecting your babies, you never stop fighting for them, you never stop believing in them, even when they can't believe in themselves. That's what it means to be a mother. That's what it means to love unconditionally. That's what it means to be family. We survived. We fought back. We won. And that's what matters. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to fight for someone you love, even when they pushed you away? Have you ever trusted your instincts when everyone else said you were wrong? What would you do if you suspected someone you care about was in danger? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's going through something similar. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories and realize they're not alone. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story about courage, survival, and the power of love. And please share this with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life you might change by sharing this message. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, no matter what darkness you're facing, there's always hope. There's always a way forward. There's always someone willing to fight for you. Stay strong, stay brave, and never stop fighting for the people you love.